Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, welcome to the Department of Energy and the Forrestal Building. I'm Frank Klotz, Undersecretary for Nuclear Security and Administrator of the National Nuclear Security Administration. I will be the Master of Ceremonies today and am delighted that you all could join us. Today's ceremony will honor the Secretary of Energy, Dr. Ernest Moniz. We are also delighted to welcome Secretary of Defense Ash Carter to the Department of Energy. Please stand for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the playing of our national anthem. Please be seated. Can we give a round of applause for the Navy Band Brass Quintet? Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my distinct honor to introduce the 25th Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for having me here. I wanted to come here to the Department of Energy, and I'm going to tell you why in just a moment. It's very important to me and to my department. I'm joined here by many dedicated public servants, among them the excellent Deputy Secretary of Defense, Elizabeth Sherwood Randall. I don't know whether Elaine and Vahid and others from my department who have responsibilities along with the rest of you are here. I see a number of other familiar faces from the Pentagon, from around the country, all of our wonderful installations. But I come here to honor one of the finest scientists and public servants I have had the privilege to know, and that's Ernest Moniz. And I'm pleased to award him the Department of Defense's highest civilian honor, which is the Distinguished Public Service Award, for his contributions to the defense of our country. And it might seem odd to some that a Secretary of Defense would come to give the Secretary of Defense would come to give the Department of Energy's leader the highest civilian award of the Department of Defense, but it shouldn't seem strange, because this award right here and now reflects so many enduring truths about our country, that its defense is so vital that we, to whom it's entrusted, must shepherd it across generations, from strategic era to strategic era, from domain to domain, not just air, land, and sea, but cyber, electronic warfare, and space, from presidential administration to presidential administration, across parties, and across our government. And that last one's critical. And DoD is fortunate and grateful for partners like Ernest. Ernest has rightly said some of his work here is at the intersection of energy, technology, and policy. And at this intersection, Ernest has made better and closer collaboration with DoD one of his priorities as a great leader of this department. And I appreciate that from him and from all of you here at DOE. As we, that is, in the Department of Defense, carry out our mission of protecting our people and making a better world. We're countering the prospect of Russian aggression and coercion, especially in Europe. We're managing historic change in the Asia-Pacific, the single region of the world of greatest consequence for America's future. We're strengthening our deterrent and defense forces in the face of North Korea's continued nuclear and missile provocations. We're checking Iranian aggression and malign influence in the Gulf and protecting our friends and allies in the Middle East. And we're accelerating the certain defeat of ISIL, destroying it and its parent tumor in Iraq and Syria, and everywhere else it metastasizes around the world, and protecting our people here at home. And of course, we also have to be flexible and agile, because when you look at history, you see that we have an imperfect record when it comes to predicting the strategic future. So in addition to today's challenges, we must be prepared also for an uncertain future, ensuring that our forces, our technology, our personnel, our training, and our operational concepts are ready for challenges we may not anticipate today. Giving America the best science and innovation to face that uncertain future is critical. And it is a critical way that we look to and benefit from the Department of Energy. Thanks to partners like Dr. Moniz and all of you here. Ernie has strengthened the DoD-DOE collaboration while leading one of the most creative and diverse agencies in the federal government as we together meet our country's challenges, but also grasp hold of its many bright opportunities. Now, another critical area where DoD cannot carry out our mission without DOE is nuclear deterrence and nuclear safety and security. Even though this mission isn't in the headlines every day like the ones I mentioned earlier, America's nuclear deterrent is the bedrock of our security. And it's been a long-time focus of mine. In fact, my first job at the Pentagon 35 years ago was working on programs like missile defense, nuclear command and control, and the nuclear arsenal. And since then, I've had the pleasure of working with Ernie from time to time on nuclear issues in varying capacities, whether in the academy or in advisory groups or in the government. And as a result, I know that he understands thoroughly and deeply that the DoD-DOE nuclear deterrence mission is indeed the bedrock of our security. And he appreciates why the service members and DoD and DOE civilians who contribute to our nuclear enterprise must and do carry out their mission with unfailing excellence. This mission is necessary to deter a large-scale nuclear attack against the United States and its allies. It helps convince potential adversaries that they can't escalate their way out of a failed conventional aggression. It assures allies that our extended deterrence guarantees are credible, enabling many of them to forego development of nuclear weapons themselves. And if deterrence fails, it provides the President with options to achieve U.S. allied objectives and defeat our enemies. Ernie and I, the other DoD and DOE senior leaders, are making sure that we sustain our deterrent by recapitalizing our broader nuclear enterprise, all of it, including all three legs of the nuclear triad. Now, even as we would all, of course, wish to live in a world without nuclear weapons, it's also true, something that President Obama has noted many times, that we may not realize that goal, certainly not in our lifetimes. And so we must continue to maintain a safe, secure, and effective nuclear deterrent as far into the future as we can see. As we do so, we're beginning to correct for decades of underinvestment in nuclear deterrence. Dating back to the end of the Cold War, when the United States believed it would be safe to allow funding for the nuclear enterprise to drop. And drop it did, dramatically. And over the last 25 years, we made only modest investments in basic sustainment and operations. But while we didn't build anything new for 25 years, and neither did our allies, others did, including Russia, North Korea, China, Pakistan, India, for a period of time, Iran. So we can't wait any longer, and we also can't operate under the mistaken assumption that our own recapitalization will somehow stimulate others to invest. The evidence is just the opposite. They have consistently invested in nuclear weapons during a quarter-century pause in U.S. investment. Our recapitalization is about sustaining deterrence in a world very different from the world of the Cold War. From ballistic missile submarines to ICBMs, from bombers to air-launched cruise missiles, we're replacing many aging nuclear weapons delivery systems because if we don't, we'll lose them, which would mean losing confidence in our ability to deter. And DoD is investing in many other parts of our nuclear enterprise as well. We're making vital investments in the nuclear command and control, communications and intelligence capabilities that support our nuclear enterprise. We're continuing to invest in the people of our nuclear force, the men and women who operate, enable, maintain, and secure our deterrent forces every day. We're making much needed infrastructure and facilities repairs to ensure the maintenance and security of the bases and installations that are home to the nuclear enterprise. And I want to stress this here, we continue to support the Department of Energy and its national laboratories that play a critical role in the nuclear deterrence mission and are partners without which this country cannot accomplish its bedrock mission. And that's important because, as I said, we face a nuclear landscape that continues to pose challenges. Ernie has been a key player in helping to shape that landscape for decades and for the better. He's led numerous international efforts to counter the threat of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, engaging international partners to improve nuclear safeguards and enable verifiable nuclear reductions. And he also personally played an instrumental role in the technical analysis and negotiations to secure the historic deal that is preventing Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. And of course, supporting our nuclear deterrent mission, collaborating with DoD and all of our scientific challenges is only part of what DOE does every day on behalf of the country. General Brent Scowcroft said at Ernie's nomination hearing that he, I'm quoting him now, didn't know anyone more suited to lead the Department of Energy. That's quite an endorsement. And as Secretary, Ernie's lived up to it in spades over the last 3 years. It's been said, in fact, that he's universally admired within the department and in the government. And the only complaint from DoE employees, as I understand it, is that they can't keep up with him. I have the same complaint, by the way, related to that. And that's because Ernie's got a lot to do to confront some of our nation's and our planet's biggest challenges. One more I'll mention is cybersecurity. Ernie's making sure DOE and its interagency colleagues work with local and federal partners to protect not only the nation's energy sector, but all of our critical infrastructure. And yet another area where Ernie's been a leader is on climate change. To combat it, Ernie's been working with foreign partners to double energy research and development, to expand the innovation pipeline, and to create more opportunities for investment over the next few years. Through it all, Ernie's demonstrated his belief in what he calls the American approach. Where and when we've got a problem, Americans recognize it, and then we solve it. That's because, as he also said, I'm a physicist. That means I'm optimistic. I couldn't agree more. He and I share a faith, not only in physics, of course, but in our nation's and our government's ability to meet and overcome the challenges we face and to seize the opportunities before us. We share that. And Ernie, because of that belief, and because of the American approach you've led here, and in the DoD-DOE partnership, you've helped ensure that millions and millions of our fellow countrymen can get up in the morning, they can go to school, they can go to work, they can live their lives, they can dream their dreams, and they can give their children a better future in safety. Today, we acknowledge you for your service, for your intellectual acuity, your historic accomplishments, the decent and civil way you conduct yourself, and your unrelenting optimism. On behalf of the men and women of the Department of Defense, on behalf of a grateful nation, Ernie, we thank you. And it is now my great honor and privilege to present the Distinguished Public Service Award to Secretary of Energy, Ernest Moniz. Ernie, please.
Thank you, Secretary Carter. Attention to orders. The Department of Defense Medal for Distinguished Public Service is awarded to Dr. Ernest Moniz. Secretary Ernest Moniz is recognized for distinguished public service as Secretary of Energy from May 2013 through November 2016. During this period, Secretary Moniz's visionary leadership and unwavering commitment resulted in significant contributions to the security of the United States. He personally fostered close collaboration between the Department of Energy and the Department of Defense on numerous critical nuclear weapons and counterproliferation programs. His insight and guidance directly and substantively enabled the continuous sustainment of our nuclear weapons stockpile as a credible and effective deterrent. In particular, he guided and oversaw several vital modernization activities, including the development of a life extension program strategy, creation of the basis for a viable nuclear weapons production enterprise, improvement of the stockpiled stewardship program, and the incorporation of intelligence in the understanding of key deterrence issues. Secretary Moniz also made profound contributions to the administration's efforts to counter the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Notably, he personally played an instrumental role in the technical analysis and negotiations that led to the successful conclusion of the Iran nuclear accord, which verifiably prevents Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Those activities included working with partner nations to minimize their holdings of weapons-grade nuclear material, developing national-level response plans for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear incidents, and establishing a nuclear center of excellence in China that will increase technical exchanges to enhance nuclear security awareness in the region. The distinctive accomplishments of Dr. Ernest Moniz reflect great credit upon himself, the Department of Energy, and the Department of Defense. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my distinct honor to introduce the Secretary of Energy, Dr. Ernest Moniz.
Well, thank you. First, let me acknowledge our DOE National Security Leadership Team, starting with our Deputy Secretary, who, of course, has already been taken by Ash. In his first move here was to declare her Deputy at Defense. Right? So, but it's good. We share everything between our departments, and but also, of course, our NNSA leadership. Lieutenant General Frank Klotz, Madeline Creedon, and by the way, I should also add, I don't know, they're here somewhere, but my national security kind of advisors of about 20 years, Jeff Hughes and the curmudgeon Vic Reese. But anyway, but it's a great team. But Ash, I really appreciate so much this honor. I'm very honored and pleased to accept this from you, a friend, a colleague, and an outstanding public servant, and especially in front of this audience that shares in this award, since it recognizes how the men and women of the Departments of Defense and Energy work together to assure America's national security. Secretary Carter called America's nuclear deterrent, you heard it a few minutes ago, the bedrock of our security, and he's called it the highest priority mission of the Department of Defense. His statement recalls for me a meeting in Moscow in 1998. We were preparing for the last Clinton-Yeltsin summit. The meeting was chaired by the national security advisors of the two countries, Sandy Berger and Andrei Kokoshin. It was you remember this period. It was a turbulent period in the national security relationship. Tensions over Russia-Iran relationships, two countries have been referred to already today. And START II ratification. Yeltsin had just finished remaking his senior leadership team in government. Economic challenges led to the devaluation of the ruble about 2 months after this meeting. So there was a lot going on, but the goal was to have a friendly and productive summit. So Sandy asked Kokoshin how we should articulate to our publics our joint commitment to deepen cooperation. I think it's fair to say this was not a question he had thought about before that. He thought there was a noticeable pause, and finally he said, how about 10,000 nuclear weapons? So the numbers may have changed, but the need for deterrence and strategic stability certainly has not, as Ash described in his remarks. Ash also has brought, and you heard it in his remarks today again, a very strong focus at DoD on innovation, and established the Defense Innovation Board. He and the chair of that board, my PCAST and Google friend Eric Schmidt, in fact, visited two of our national labs, Sandia and Los Alamos, a couple of months ago. In fact, I'd like to also recognize that the directors of those two laboratories, plus Savannah River, Terry Mikulski, and maybe Steve Ashby here, I'm not sure, Pacific Northwest. So we have several of our lab directors here, and they, of course, and some of their colleagues play a critical role in our relationship. But today, let me just spend a few minutes discussing the full range of the DoD-DOE symbiosis and our shared commitment to the technology innovation agenda. First and foremost, we are proud to partner with DoD, uniformed and civilian, in sustaining the deterrent through innovation and science. Indeed, it is not recognized enough how success in maintaining a reliable and effective stockpile without testing for a quarter century, and for extending that success for many decades into the future, results from a remarkable record of innovation at DOE's national laboratories, innovation that will need to continue as those decades click on the odometer going forward. In a little more than a decade, starting in the mid-90s, a new high-performance computing architecture was realized, and experimental facilities reaching previously unattainable pressures and temperatures were invented and implemented to understand nuclear weapons properties and dynamics in ways that were not approached with the testing paradigm. This serves a global no-test regime, the notable exception of North Korea these days, but a no-test regime that is clearly in our national security interest. Of course, stockpile stewardship also relies on sophisticated surveillance and life extension. The production complex is in need of major recapitalization, just as are all three legs of the nuclear triad, as Ash noted. And I have been very privileged to sing this tune off, as evident today, off the same song sheet as the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs, Stratcom Commander, and others involved in this effort. Carrying this commitment of recapitalization through for the next couple of decades is essential for strategic stability, supported by deterrence in the face of difficult geopolitical developments such as those with Russia and North Korea. As Ash has said, we cannot have our DOE and DoD nuclear capabilities age into obsolescence before the deterrence mission is complete. Our common nuclear security agenda extends beyond deterrence to include reducing the nuclear danger. When Ash made some remarks at Minot Air Force Base in September, he noted a background that we share. Physicists of an age such that some of the Manhattan Project physics giants were our mentors in nuclear and particle physics. As an aside, by the way, President Obama obviously thought his first-term cabinet was a little light in quantum chromodynamics, and so he brought two of us in for the second term. Another aside, our good friend Dick Garwin was awarded the President's Medal of Freedom a couple of hours ago. He's in the age space between Ash and me and the Manhattan physics giants, those mentors really taught us much more than physics. They showed by example the importance of bringing a scientifically grounded approach to public affairs of great consequence for our national security. They educated us that a commitment to deterrence is just one side of the coin. The other is an equal passion to securing and eliminating nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons materials. The age of international terrorism has only heightened the importance of the latter. Ash and I both served in the Clinton administration, like now at DoD and DOE, respectively. And Ash had a critical role in implementing Nunn-Lugar in the former Soviet Union, while I focused here on nuclear materials protection and elimination, for example, through the megatons to megawatts program that eliminated 500 tons of HEU over 20 years. While our cooperation with Russia has slowed, this non-proliferation work continues at DOE with considerable success under President Obama's Prague agenda. I want to again note the role of our national labs, and in particular going back to the 90s, obviously it's continuous, but going back to that time, the importance of the scientist-to-scientist collaboration that allowed U.S. boots on the ground quickly to secure at-risk materials along with Russian colleagues. We need a return, frankly, to establishing much more of this scientist-to-scientist interaction as an investment in the future, even if we don't know when that investment will bear fruit. A non-proliferation landmark during this administration is the Iran Agreement, which significantly rolls back Iran's nuclear program for 15 years and gains transparency and verification of peaceful purpose indefinitely. I had the opportunity to negotiate the agreement alongside Secretary Kerry, with 9 DOE labs and plants backing us up. Before the agreement, to give one example, some said that the plutonium-producing Iraq reactor could not be allowed to go hot, even if it meant an additional commitment to military action. Now it's been taken apart and its calandria filled with cement, peacefully. I'll always remember a pithy statement made earlier this year to me by the Chief of Staff of the Army. Thank you for saving lives. 5 words, very important. I'll never forget them. It's critically important now that the agreement continues to succeed in eliminating the risk of an Iranian nuclear weapon across successive administrations and Congresses. In terms of DoD, DOE, let me also add we have a terrific relationship with the nuclear Navy, and I'm honored to see Admiral Caldwell sitting here today. We look forward to the first Ford-class aircraft carrier hitting the water next year, early next year, with powerful new nuclear reactors. And for the triad, the Naval Reactors Office that is responsible to the Departments of Energy and of the Navy will continue, of course, to advance the new power plant for the Ohio-class submarine replacement that is so important a decade plus from now. Our national labs also serve the national security and homeland security communities, including the intelligence community, more broadly by providing extraordinary analytical and technological capability in a secure environment. One example of a capability that underpins many national security applications is high-performance computing, and we work with DoD, elements of DoD, and we are now well along the way towards exascale computing integrated with the big data analytics and artificial intelligence that will increase our powers quite dramatically. Finally, I want to emphasize that our work in clean and secure energy also contributes to national security. Military leaders have articulated the connection between climate change and national security for over a decade. The assertion is not that climate change alone causes conflict and mass dislocations of populations, but rather that is likely to be a contributing factor along with political and cultural stresses. As a timely example, issues of climate change and water availability are postulated as contributing factors to the origins of the Syrian conflict. The climate risks in Africa raise the specter of additional American military responsibilities, potentially ranging from aid to action. The principal solution for climate change risk mitigation lies with clean energy development that drives down costs so that large-scale deployment goes forward in industrialized, emerging, and developing economies. And energy technology innovation is key to that success. It's a core mission for DOE along with nuclear security. And it's been a privilege to serve a president who placed both of these missions, climate, energy, innovation, and nuclear security, high on his priority list. And again, the innovation agenda is central to all that we do in all of our missions. Energy security is also key. Domestically, that translates into the need for a modern energy infrastructure that is both reliable and resilient to an evolving threat spectrum, from extreme weather exacerbated by global warming to cyber attacks, as Ash referred to. And we are addressing that through our quadrennial energy review efforts with another big product to come this year. Internationally, the events in Ukraine in 2014 led to a re-examination of 21st century energy security principles by the G7 and EU. Energy systems with reduced dependence on imported oil and natural gas are clearly part of this. The climate agenda is also an energy security agenda. But the overarching statement of that restatement of energy security principles was that energy security is a collective responsibility among friends and allies, especially for the United States with its unique global security responsibilities that Ash is responsible for. Energy insecurity of an ally is a national security problem for us. Europe's overdependence on natural gas from Russia is a case in point, and upcoming European decisions on expanded natural gas supply sources and routes therefore have implications for American national security. This is yet another front on which the Department of Energy is addressing our country's security risks and hopefully reducing the burden on our defense colleagues. To conclude, I again thank Secretary Carter and his DoD colleagues for recognizing the essential partnership between DoD and DOE in national security. Again, our labs and our innovation agenda are certainly key to this partnership, and I am confident that it will continue to the benefit of the country that we are proud to serve. I will just add as well, January 24th, brother. We can do some other things together. Bro. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. This concludes today's ceremony. Enjoy a safe and happy Thanksgiving with emphasis on the word safe. And please remain at your seats until the official party departs. Thank you.
Oh, would that be us?
That would be you.
All right.